manage to benefit from that. There's a little bit more. If you need some bread, please take it. I think that's awesome that you're sharing the wealth. Anytime you can, if you have too much of something and you can give to someone else who doesn't have it, I think that's great for everybody involved, you as well as the recipients. But I would remind you, this is a classroom, so we don't allow eating or drinking in here. And I realize some people have conditions, medical conditions, where they do have to eat a little bit more frequently than the average person, just due to metabolism issues and what have you. And that's totally fine, but you still can't eat and drink in here. You have to actually take that stuff out into the hallway. Does that make sense? It's totally cool if you need to step out to eat and drink, totally cool, but you can't eat and drink in the classroom. The reason being, in terms of what's going on here, we got a lot of technology. If you get liquid in it, it will catch on fire, and bad things happen when fire starts. Also, if any of you are from Florida, I don't know how many of you are, how many of you aren't, but the ant situation here is unreal. If they even think you have food, they invite everyone they have ever met to come to this place and party. And let me tell you, in terms of, you think this room doesn't smell so great now, let's try to rub some food and drink into the rug, and then you'll see it gets a lot worse. And then the bug thing, again, is unbelievable. They get everywhere and in a hurry. So in the interest of trying to maintain this environment as a place we'd like to go every day, unfortunately, we can't eat or drink in here. So, and again, that's not my policy. That is a school policy, but I'm the one who's going to get shot if I don't enforce it. So I gotta be the bad guy there and tell you, I'm sorry, but you can't do that. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, just want to make sure. I'm not making stuff up. I really am. I'm not. All right, so here we are at lecture 2. How did you guys think about, what did you guys think about lab on Monday? Was that fun? You get a lot done? Yeah. Okay, cool, cool. That first class and that first lab, that's when you kind of go, whoa, what happened? This is not the Full Sail I was in, last week. Welcome to your degree program. You know what I mean? We're moving forward, pursuing a career in this field. From this class forward, this is the way your classes are going to be. You're going to get a lot of information in a short period of time. You're going to have a lot of work to do. Does that make sense? My personal recommendation for you guys is work like crazy through the course of the month. And at the end of every month, there's always a couple of days before the next class starts. That's where you should just binge go crazy. Does that make sense? You can't really go crazy anymore during the week. This is a whole other animal. And I think what most people don't realize is the overwhelming majority of you are only here for 2 years, and you're trying to build a career out of that. That's very challenging in and of itself. If you look at what anybody does in this world, 2 years of prep is not that much. And the other scary thing is that 2 years goes by super fast. Just this morning, I ran into a student of mine, and they were saying, my goodness, I'm graduating next month. I feel like I was in your class last week. And literally, I hear that every month without fail. Somebody comes up to me and goes, I can't believe I'm almost done. The time you are here at Full Sail is a super, super awesome time. You're going to love every minute of it. You will never be surrounded by so many creative people at one time who are similarly driven and passionate about what you're driven and passionate about. You will never be surrounded by so many instructors who are not only super talented, but really love what they do. So you really got to take advantage of that time you're here because it goes quickly. Does that make sense? So again, just advice, me to you. I've seen it. I've worked here for a long time. I know what works and what doesn't. And you kind of have to change the way you approach your school now. This is a whole different thing now. And really, we're talking about success. And it is directly related to how much you invest yourself into your classes in this school. That's what you'll walk out of here with. Does that make sense? Okay, and I want to let you know that because I don't know if anybody's ever going to have that talk with you, but that's an important talk. Make sense? Okay, cool. So knowing is understanding and making better decisions as a result. All right, so let's talk about the stuff we're going to talk about today. As always, we typically start with some arty terms and then some little technical things on occasion, and then we will delve into some more fun stuff. And exercises and activities, of course. But first, I got to share my screen so everybody has something to look at. And then now we're off and running. Cool. So I'm glad you guys had a lot of fun. You've got yourself up and running. So here we go with lecture 2, the deuce. Proportion and scale. Today, one of the things we're going to be talking about is proportion and scale. They sound very similar in their ideology, but they are very, very different. So we're going to try to differentiate those for you this morning. And by the way, do you think this is something we're going to be grading on? Absolutely. There are points associated with everything we talk about. So this is definitely something that's going to come up again. All right, so first let's talk about proportion. In terms of proportion, what we're talking about is parts of an object relative to other parts of the same object. So when we're comparing how big something is or how small something is or its relative size or shape, when we're talking about parts of one thing compared to other parts of the same thing, we're talking about proportion. Now, in terms of proportion, it can really help us out as artists. Typically, we talk about people being 7.5 to 7.5 heads tall in terms of their height. We use the head as an arbitrary unit of measurement, and we can measure the entire body and other parts of the body utilizing that system. Superheroes tend to be 10 heads tall because they are larger than life and bigger and more epic than the average bear. So in this instance, proportion can really help us out. Also, in terms of where proportion can help you in terms of being an artist is in some instances, your reference information isn't really giving you all the information you need to make a good decision on how to draw something or shape it and what have you. And that's where you have to make a call as an artist. And that's really one of the big skills that will benefit you tremendously. So for example, if you're not sure exactly how far apart to space eyes on a human being, let's say that your reference image is somewhat offset and angled and you're not really seeing a direct on look at whatever it is you're modeling or drawing even, how far apart do I set the eyes? What you'll notice is with most people, the distance between the two eyes is 1 eye distance. So you can take 1 eye and imagine 1 eye in the middle, and then you can space the other 2 eyes appropriately. Now, granted, there are people whose eyes are closer together, and there are people whose eyes are further apart. You know, we see those people. That's not an unusual thing. But if you look at the bell curve of humanity, most of us about 1 eye distance, but you'll have further apart and closer together out on about the 15% on both ends. Does that make sense? Okay, another nice proportion that can help you out tremendously. The length of the forearm is typically the length of the foot. So again, if you're trying to make some calls because the information that you have visually is not helping you, as an artist, there's some proportions you can draw on, literally and figuratively, to help you figure out the relative sizes of things. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, proportion can also help you out in identification. We've been talking about silhouette and how important that is for the identification of an object. Well, proportion can help us identify gender in human species. Males tend to be broader at the shoulder, narrower at the hips. Females tend to be broader at the hips, narrower at the shoulders. Again, there are people on both sides of that bell curve, but most of us fit right in the middle there. So from a silhouette, using proportion as my guide, I can guess gender right away. Does that make sense? Okay, so identification of the object in question, job 1. So in terms of proportion, again, yep, this is a graded component of the projects that you guys are building. So for example, if this is your reference image, these 2 models are close enough in proportion to the original that they would earn all the points associated with proportion. These objects too far away, too different, the proportions are not accurate enough. And what you will notice is there's not a lot of variance, right? These are pretty tight in terms of acceptable, and then everything else does not earn the points because the proportions are too far off. Does that make sense? Did I hell yeah on that? Okay, good. So proportion is off on that one. Now we got to talk about scale. Scale is a little bit different. Scale has to do with size, but what we're talking about when we talk about scale is parts of the object compared to other objects, or the whole object compared to another object. And that helps us see, well, how big or how small is something? So for example, if I look at this image of tugboats, I'm not really sure if those are toy tugboats or those real tugboats, because I don't have anything to help me with the scale. There's nothing in that image that will give it to me. How many of you guys think it's a toy? Show me the hand. All right. How many of you guys think those are real? Okay, those are actually toy tugboats, believe it or not. And the only giveaway really is those big numbers on the front there. They look a little bit like stickers, but those are remote control boats. You can drive them at SeaWorld. But point being, without something to help me with scale, I have no idea how big those things are, or small. So if I have a point of reference that I can use, okay, now scale becomes apparent. So either that guy is humongous, or those people are teeny weeny, but either way, I have a much better idea of scale as a result of this other object. Does that make sense? Okay, so where does scale come into play? Scale in our project is going to come into play when we are bringing all of our assets together. If you remember the end of this ride, what we're going to do is take 4 objects that we've built, and we're going to create a little still life scene with it, right? So it's important that the scale is correct on the object so that when we bring them together, they look like they're the right size. Okay, so if this is my reference image, what I'm looking for in terms of the scale of my project, this is an accurate representation of that image. In terms of the object, it's pretty dang close. Now, here's where the scale is off. You can see right away things don't seem to be the right size. They look wrong. Does that make sense? You wouldn't even need this reference. You could just look at that and go, that doesn't look right. Does that make sense? And that's definitely a big buzzkill when it comes to creating art, is when somebody looks at your stuff and goes, that doesn't look right. That's like the last thing you want them to say. So in terms of scale, it becomes very important that we have the scale correct. Now, the way we're going to do scale for this class is very much like they do scale in the industry. They determine in advance the overall scale of the project, and everybody uses the same scale. Because when we build, when we're making a movie, we're making a video game, whatever it is we're making, you don't build that room, build all the objects in the room, build all the characters in the room, and then go. Every single piece of anything you do is all made in pieces. They're all separate files, but we need to bring them all together in the end to build the world that's telling the story we want to tell. Does that make sense? So as a result, we have to have the correct scale for each of the objects that are built independently so that when we bring them together, they're all sized just right. They fit together, no need for adjustment. Does that make sense? So in terms of what we're going to be using, we are going to be using the scale of 1 grid unit in Maya is equal to 1 inch. And remember last class we talked about grid units being that grid inside of Maya, and 1 grid unit in Maya will equal 1 inch. So when I'm looking at this grid here on the floor, that's 1 inch. I can look at it in my orthographic views. That's 1 inch. So when I'm measuring the objects that I'm building, I want to make sure they're the right size. 1 grid unit is 1 inch. Now, something very important for you to realize about that scale is that I'm going to help you figure out how to do this. And the way we're going to figure out the scale of the object is literally the objects you are building. If you're in my local class, the objects are with you in the lab. We have a ruler in here. You can just measure it, and that'll figure out exactly how big these things are. Because when we build these objects, we're going to give you reference images to build them from, but the images are not to scale. They're pictures. They're whatever size picture is when we took it. Does that make sense? The image plane does not guarantee the correct scale. Proportion, it helps out tremendously with. Scale, not at all. That's where I have to build the object first until it's completed, and then scale it to the right size. Make sense? Okay, so if you're in the local class, you have the ability to measure the object and figure out its relative size so that you can scale it when you're all done. If you are not in the local class, you still have the opportunity to figure it out, and the local class can do this as well. But in terms of the images we're using, let me go into my asset file folder. I'll go into my level 1 assets and I'll open up the, oh, the ladybug is cute. No, I want to do the oil cooler. Inside the file for the oil cooler, in the source images folder, you will see that we have reference images in there for you guys to use. And these not only help you to build the object, but they also help you with scale. So for example, I can open up this image and I can see if I build the oil cooler gear, it is 1, 2, 3, 4.5 grid units tall. So in terms of the conversion, because the grid units in the picture are not the same as grid units in Maya, the conversion is 2 squares in the image is equal to 1 square in Maya. So you're going to have to divide things by 2. Does that make sense? Build the object, figure out how many grid units high it is in terms of the picture, and divide that number by 2. And then that's going to give you the size that it should be in Maya. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Oh yeah. Okay. So either of those methods will allow you to figure out exactly how big to build something. And incidentally, in terms of building things, you'll notice that we have a whole bunch of images in there. Maybe not all the images load in Maya, but super helpful for you to take a look in that source images folder and look at the additional reference images we gave you to help you see and understand the object you're trying to build, because understanding it is a big piece of being able to build it. Yes, go ahead.
Is it going to be the same for all the reference images?
Oh yeah, all the reference images, we took them, so there's going to be a grid behind them. Absolutely. Like I said, in terms of the modeling world, what we are trying to create here for you guys is the perfect world. You guys have great image planes to utilize in order to build the objects you're going to build. For those of you who are in my local class, you can actually touch and see these objects. In the real world, and actually, to be honest with you, in classes that follow this one even that soon, the reference images are not perfect. It's whatever you can find. But I'm trying to make things easier for you by giving you every advantage I can. Does that make sense? Okay, so it only gets harder from here. We tried super hard to give you guys great reference. Not always the case. Sometimes you might have to work from a drawing on a napkin. Build this. Does that make sense? That happens. I'm not kidding. So point being, we're trying to create a perfect world for you because you're just starting out. All right, 1 grid unit, 1 inch in Maya. All right, let's talk a little bit about layers. I know we touched on this first class already because you guys were asking me about it, but in terms of layers, this is a great way to organize our scenes. Just like in Photoshop, we can create layers and put things on those layers and hide and show those layers with the eyeball. We can lock things and template things. The layer system in Maya is very much an organizational capacity. So it does a lot of those kinds of fun things. But let's take a look at the creation of a layer and putting objects on a layer. So here I am in Maya, my best buddy, right? And let's say I want to create an object and create a layer for it. I'm just create this cube here. And I want to make a layer for it. So I'm going to go to the Layers section in Maya. And incidentally, if you have different windows open in terms of over here, like the attribute editor or what have you, you're not going to see the layers. You have to click on the channel box because the layers are associated with the channel box. So make sure you've got that one selected. And all you need to do is go to the word layers, click on the mouse button, and choose Create Empty Layer. And what that's going to do is make this brand new layer for you. And of course, you want to name your layers. Don't leave them at their default names. We don't leave anything at their default names. So I'm going to double click on it with my left mouse button, and that will give me the ability to name it. And you can do whatever you want, just something that makes sense. And then hit Save. So now this is called the cube layer. Now you can have many layers if you want. Make as many as you wish. But when it comes time to putting an object on there, you select the layer you'd like it to be on with the left mouse button, and with the object selected, hold down the right mouse button and add selected objects. And that will literally take that object and put it on that layer. So now you have the ability to hide or show that particular object using the V for visibility. Make sense? Okay, so, and that's the way we're going to be using the layer editor in Maya, is an organizational capacity. It does a lot of other really fun stuff too, but for what we're going to be doing, that's what it's going to be doing primarily. All right, any questions on the creation of a layer? Again, that's pretty straightforward, but it bears getting into. Okay. So off of our periwinkle vocabulary things and on to talking about polygons. It's very important that we discuss polygons because this is a polygon modeling class. So that's primarily what we're going to be using, if not completely what we're going to be using. And in terms of polygons, we need to understand some terms associated with polygons, and we need to kind of understand the material. Just like if this was a woodworking class, we would be talking all about different kinds of wood, the grain of wood, hardness, softness, the different ways you can use it. You really need to understand the material you're working with. So we're going to talk about polygons now in much that same way. Now, you will hear people talk about polygons, and they will use a lot of different terms. Polygons, polygon mesh, mesh, geometry, polys. There's a lot of different names, but they're all kind of talking about the same thing, so I'm going to try to differentiate a little bit for you. Polygon mesh, mesh, or geometry is all talking about creating a physical object using polygons as the material that you're building with. All of those, mesh, geometry, polygons. You can also hear people refer to a polygon. They're actually talking about one face of a polygon, and they'll call it a polygon. How many polys does that have? And we'll talk about what that means. But point being, it can get confusing because of the way the verbiage is used. But all of these things are talking about polygon geometry or mesh. All right? Now, polygons not only are a mesh or an object or geometry, but there are also smaller components of polygons. And the way I'd like you to think about that is, imagine me. I am a single object, Steve, but I am composed of millions of cells that came together to make me. So you can deal with me as a whole entity, or you can deal with me as a series of components that come together to make me. And polygons work the same way. Polygons have three primary modeling components, and they are the vertex or vertice, the edge, and the face. And we're going to talk about those three things right here. So fret ye not. All right, so here's my polygon geometry, and I'm going to hide my grid just because it's less distracting. So I'm going to go to my panel menu show, and this lists everything that you could possibly see in this particular window, and I'm going to uncheck grid with the left mouse button, and then now I don't see the grid there. But you'll notice it's in my other views because they all have their own show menu. So you can hide and show as you wish from window to window. All right, so let's go back to perspective. Now, this polygon mesh, this geometry, this mesh is in what we call object mode. And I know it's in object mode because it's green when I select it. Green means object mode. I'm dealing with it as the whole entity. But I can also deal with it in terms of its components. If I hover my cursor over the geometry, not to the side, not over here, over the geometry, if I hold down my right mouse button, you will see a circular menu set that pops up over this larger rectangular one. The components are housed in here, so we're going to talk about these guys. First, I'm going to go to vertex or vertice mode. When I go to vertex or vertice mode, what looks different? It's blue, right? Anything else different? Yeah, there's these cute little pinkish purple dots, right? Hanging out where the lines meet, right? Those are called the vertex or the vertices. And in terms of the object, you can select and manipulate these. Guess what you use to manipulate them? I can use scale. I can use all my tools in the toolbox because those are my hands, right? I'm trying to make something. This is my clay. So I can select the vertice, and you notice it turns yellow when it's selected. And I can use my move tool, and I can literally move the vertice. and that changes the shape of the object. I can grab another one and move it. So now I'm changing what this thing looks like. All right? I can select one object and then hold Shift and select another object so I can get two at a time. And then I can move those guys together. Make sense? I can also do what we call a marquee selection, where I can hold down the left mouse button and drag, and I make like a box. And I will select everything that's in that box when I let go. Something to be aware of, though, in terms of selection, it looks like I've selected 5 vertices here, right? But if you look at the other side, you see, oh, no, actually I have 6. Selection does not respect geometry. Does that make sense? You can select through geometry. So be very aware of what you have or have not selected. Sometimes you have something selected and you don't realize it and you're moving it around and you can't figure out what's going on. So when you do a selection, be aware that you can select things that are on the other side of the object. So you got to be conscious of that. Make sense? Okay. Now in terms of this selection, again, you can move things. You can rotate things. You can scale things. All of these will change the shape of the object. Make sense? Vertices, points in space that define shape. Make sense? Yep. Okay, good. Now, I can go to the next component level, which is the edge. And when I go to edge mode, is there anything different? It's blue, but those cute pinkish purple dots are gone, right? We don't see vertices anymore. What we see are edges. If you have 2 points on a polygon object, there can only be a straight line connecting them, and that's sort of a rule of polygons, a straight line between those 2 points, and that is called an edge. Edges can also be manipulated. You can select an edge now if you want to. And again, you can scale it. You can rotate it. You can move it, right? But when I move an edge, what am I also moving? I'm changing the position of the faces, but I'm also moving 2 vertices, right? One on either side of that edge. Now, if you have 3 or more edges, you create what we call a face. And you can select faces as well. And again, they can be moved, right? I can rotate them. I can scale them. All of these things change the shape of the object also. But when I move a face, what am I moving in this instance? 4 edges and 4 vertices, right? All at once. Now, in terms of this object and moving the components, you might be wondering, well, why do I need so many different component levels? Why is that so important? I could probably get away with 2. But we need these different component levels because of the different levels of detail we're trying to create. How many of you guys have ever painted a room in a house? Anybody? I hate painting. I hate moving worst, but painting is definitely number 2. In terms of painting, if I'm trying to paint the wall, what do I use to paint the wall? A brush? What if it's a big wall? The roll thingy, right? The roller. Because that thing slaps a lot of paint on the wall super fast so I can get done, right? I don't want to be in there all day. So I'm going to use a big roller. Many walls have molding at the bottom. Some of them have it at the top, too, if you're in a fancy house. In terms of that molding, can I use a roller on that? No. What happens if I use a roller on the molding? I'm going to get paint all over the rug, right? I'm going to get sent to the naughty corner. But maybe I won't ever have to paint again. So I don't know. Maybe I should screw that up on purpose. But the point is, in terms of painting, roller's not going to help me. I want a medium-sized brush for the molding, right? Or one of those fancy sponge ones. Those are cool. And a lot of painter's tape. But point being, I can't use a roller. I need something smaller. What if I'm painting a windowsill, right? And I'm trying to keep the paint off the glass, right? I got tape there. I can get it with a razor later, but it's much better for me if I can paint that windowsill without getting paint all over the glass. Can I use a medium brush for that? No, not going to work. I need a finer brush for finer control. So when I'm manipulating a polygon object and its components, sometimes I'm working a small detail, so I use a small component like a vertice. Sometimes I'm making a big change, so I need to be grabbing faces. Does that make sense? There is a speed and efficiency to your workflow when you choose the correct component level to make the adjustment you're looking for. Does that make sense? Because you could make a very dense object and push and pull vertices all day long. It would take a really long time to build something. Make sense? Okay. So this is why we have those different component levels and why they're so helpful. Incidentally, some of you might have been wondering, how did I make this object so that you could see through it? Well, in terms of my view modes in Maya, when I'm looking at an object and it's shaded like this, it's called shaded mode. And I can achieve shaded mode by pressing 5 on my keyboard. 5 equals shaded mode. I can also go into what we call wireframe mode. If I press 4 on my keyboard, we go into what we call wireframe mode. And it's basically like a 3D blueprint. You can see right through the object. It still looks 3D, but it's not filled in and shaded, right? But I can do that with 5. Make sense? Okay. Let's go talk about some more neat polygon stuff. As I said before, between 2 points, only a straight line in a polygon object. All right, you guys ready to play with some polygon components? Very cool. So you see the activity sign that pops up there and says we're going to do an activity. You see Sarah lifting weights, I'm jogging, and Marcus is doing push-ups. So you know that means we're going to have to do what? No, we don't. I wouldn't mind if this was an exercise class, but that's not what we're doing today. We're going to be doing exercises, right, from our exercise files, our activity files, right? So we're going to A, launch Maya, and then B, what are we going to do right away? Set the project. Remember, that is the first and most important thing. So we're going to set the project to our activity file folder so that Maya knows what we're working on, and then we're going to do this super fun activity that will give you an opportunity to manipulate components, the ones we've been talking about, and get a feel for how they work. So, time to set the project. So Maya, luckily for me, has already been launched. So I'm already here, but I still have to set my project and let Maya know that this is what I want to work on. File, set project, and I'm going to go to my documents folder. I'm going to go to my 3DF folder that I created for myself, and I go to my activity file folder, and I just click it once, and then set my project. Now, very important to remember, setting your project and opening a file are two totally different things. They do not even remotely relate to each other. I set my project so Maya knows what we're working on. Now I open the file. File, open scene. Because I set my project, Maya immediately goes to the scenes folder of the folder I set my project to, and it says, okay, well, which one of these awesome activities do you want to do? And I say, Maya, more than life itself, I want to work on the edge flow activity. So I select that and then hit open. Now, when this scene opens, if you have set your project properly, you will see geometry in there, and you will see this really cool image in the background. And this is called an image plane. We use these for guides. We're going to talk more about that. But if you open this file and you see a big pink box with a big pink X through it, guess what you didn't do right? Set the project, because that's how Maya lets you know, I don't know what you're working on. I can't find the pictures this file is asking for. I don't know what to do. If you do see that, you have to set your project again and then open it again. Does that make sense? So then you have to go back to File, Set Project, and do it again, set it, and then after you've set it, then you go to File, Open Scene, and again, you're going to get that edge flow activity out. Now, in terms of the edge flow activity, the perspective view is not the view we're going to be utilizing to make adjustments. So make sure you're not in this view when you're making some changes. You want to be in your orthographic views. And in this case, we're talking about the front view. And this is where it's really going to help in terms of modeling. Who can remember how we go into shaded mode? 5 is shaded mode. 4 is wireframe. If you're in wireframe mode, you'll be able to see the image plane behind the geometry. The geometry is colored, so it stands out. And it's nice to have colored stuff. It's fun. So what you see is we have an image that has some lines drawn on it. This is the edge flow, or the way we would like the edges to flow along the surface of the geometry. And this represents our geometry, this object right here. And you can see that these lines here do not match the lines in the drawing. So our goal is to move the components of this polygon object, a geometry plane, move the components so that the edge flow of the geometry matches the edge flow of the drawing. So here's what we're going to do. If you put your cursor over the geometry and hold down the right mouse button, you get access to the components. But you'll notice that when I do this, I'm over the edges of the object. If I am over a space or an opening and I hold that down, it's going to be asking me about the image plane, the picture behind it. That's not what I want. I want the components in here. So I'm going to make sure I'm over the geometry. In shaded mode, I'm over the geometry no matter where I am. But in wireframe, there is a such thing as the spaces between. So I hold down the right mouse button, and I'm going to choose, in this instance, vertex or vertice mode. It turns light blue to tell me I'm in component mode. I can then select a vertice using my select tool, and then switch to my move tool, and then move the vertice into place. Again, select, move, select, move. And what you will notice is as I move the vertices, I'm also moving the edges. And now my edges are starting to match the edges or the edge flow in the illustration behind. So what I'd like you to do, and Brian and I are going to walk around and see how you do at it, is I'd like you to try to match the edge flow of your geometry to the edge flow of the drawing behind it. And you'll see we've got a whole bunch of things for you to work on. And they all use different tools and different components. The easier ones are across the top. The harder ones are as you go down. So I'd like you to start working on, try to do these first 3 of each row. So do these 3, then 3 of the blues, 3 of the reds, and then 3 of the purples. And when you get down to the purple, what you'll notice is we're not dealing with flat planes anymore like we were in the other examples. You'll notice we're dealing with cubes now. And when we're dealing with cubes, we're in 3D, which means there's a depth component to the detail. So make sure you are matching the edge flow of the geometry, but look at this little 3/4 picture here that we gave you right next to it, because that'll really give you a big hint as to which edges need to move to achieve the shape that we're looking for. Does that make sense? These are much harder, but this is where we want to go with it. Make sense? Get a hell yeah? All right, awesome. So Brian and I are going to walk around and see how you guys are doing. And I'll let my digital friends at home get at it too. Let me know if you've got any questions, and we will do our best to address them. Hopefully you guys have mice now, or using your tablet. Either one is fine. How you guys doing? Make sure you're in your orthographic views, not your perspective view. So go to front view. There you go. Right down there. Yeah.
Okay, so I forgot how like that.
Well, you want to use the Option key in conjunction with left, right, and middle mouse button. But for today, because you don't have your mouse, and this will seem like a living hell for you, just press F for frame, and that will frame the object for you, and that'll at least bring it into view right away.
I click the object and then
F, yep, and that will frame it for you. But try to remember your mouse or your tablet for next time, because it will significantly slow your progress. If you hit spacebar, this window will get bigger. How you guys doing? Good?
She's got to finish the installation.
Oh, okay. All right.
How do I set it so this is the viewport I want to see?
You have to hit spacebar. That maximizes that window.
Oh,
Hit spacebar again. Now hit spacebar over this one. Now you're in that one. Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. How are we doing? Oh, downloading your files, okay. What's up? How's it going? Excellent. Well, what you're going to want to do is zoom in on that particular piece of geometry. The shortcut for doing that is if you press F on your keyboard, that will frame whatever you have selected, so that'll get you close. And if you go to, and if you press 4 on your keyboard, remember we were talking about wireframe versus shaded? Now you can see geometry. If you hold down the right mouse button over the edges, it'll give you the components you need. Over the edges themselves, not over the spaces. There. Now choose vertex. All right, so now you can grab individual vertices and then using your move tool, move them into position. You got to use your move tool. It's this one. Up there. Right mouse button. Now go to the blue mode. Right mouse button, choose vertex. No, you got to be over the edges to do it, not over the spaces. Right over the green line. There you go. Choose vertex. Vertex. Now, using your move tool, then you move the object. Oh, get back to vertex mode. Yep. Now, move the object, or move the vertex. Left mouse button. There you go. Does that make sense? You want to move it up, though. Yep. Whoop, down a little bit. Right there. Now grab the next one. All righty? How you guys doing? Good? There you go. Good. We're navigating. Good, good, good. How's it going?
Can I just put my bill button back? Or will it like mess it up and like somehow go through it?
No, because if you're in an orthographic view, it can only move on 2 axes, X and Y, so it's not possible. Yeah, then it would go on a different angle. Yep. But that's one of the benefits of the orthographic view. How you guys doing? Good? Yay. Yes. How we doing? We move components. Make sure you're in component modes. Right mouse button, choose vertex. There you go. And now select a vertex and move it. Oh, try again. You'll get the hang of it. It's a touch thing, and that's why we do it in class, because you get a chance to practice. Right mouse button. You're not in component mode, so you can't move any of the components. Right mouse button over the geometry. Okay, make sure you're over the geometry. Right mouse button. It's okay. The lower one is right click. Yep, you don't have to drag. Just put it over the edge and hold down the right mouse button. Two fingers. Yep. If you put your cursor over the thing and hold it with 2 fingers, you get the right mouse button, and then you got to choose vertex from the options that pop up.
Oh, vertex.
Yep. Now you select a vertex, and using your move tool, you move it. Oh, try again. It's out of component mode. Oh, sorry. How are you guys doing?
Setting project, you said the activity files. Right?
Yep, the activity file folder, which you should have downloaded from FSL. Yes.
Would it be easier for people to know about the WER shortcut?
We don't get into shortcuts right away.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't.
I just remember it from 3DS like one of my roommates or so trying to make it work a little bit faster.
Oh yeah, but we don't get into hotkeys right away because I don't want people to limit their vision to their hotkeys. I want them to look for stuff on the interface. I want them to start recognizing things.
Can I still use it?
Oh yeah, you can use it. That's fine. The problem is if you learn just the hotkeys of an application, it narrows your field of understanding because you don't explore the app at all. You just use those few hotkeys.
I just know the shortcut for like rotate, move, and all that. I don't
Yeah.
know any of the other.
Oh, okay. But again, the issue, I don't get into them right away. A couple of them I touch on, but we do talk about hotkeys once we get about halfway through. Yep.
So this is the actual file, right?
Yep, that's the activity file folder. So you want to set your project to that.
Okay, so
Where is it? That's not it. Nope, that is not it. It should be called activity file.
can I change?
Well, but that's not the file. Like if you go into that file, that's not the right one. That is your activity file folder, but where is that? Because that's where you have to set it. I'll go back. That's your skill check. That's a different file system. You should have one called activity file folder. Do you know where it is? No. Okay. Well, then what you need to do is look for it. Type it in up there. Activity file folder. All right. Now, activity files, and it does not. Those are some of the files from the activity file folder, but I don't see the folder itself. Let's do this. Do it as a list. All right. And type in. Well, no, you got activity file there.
Yeah, I just downloaded.
Oh, so it's in your downloads folder. Okay, so it's in downloads. You got to either take it out of there or set your project to your download folder. You see, it's in here. You see what I'm saying? You have to know where it is to tell Maya where it is. Does that make sense? Okay, so now what you have to do is here, go to your downloads. No, it won't let you even go there. Okay, do this then. Move all this stuff out of the way except for that window. You hide everything else. All right, now take your activity file folder and just drag it to your desktop. Okay, now close it. Close this here. Now, set your project and choose your, on your desktop, you'll see your activity file folder. File, set project. Choose your activity file folder. It should be on your desktop. Choose desktop. Now look for activity file folder. There you go. Set. Now open up File Open Scene. There you go. Edge Flow activity. Yep. You say OK to everything. There you go. You're up and running. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes.
I was just wondering, but were you, when we actually get to like bottom
modeling if we are?
Mm-hmm. Oh, we're getting to modeling, trust me.
Are you, for anybody that's kind of new to this, are you going to be making them turn on the little face thing with you, or is it kind of like?
If they want to, I'm going to show it as an option.
Yeah.
Because some people like that
Yeah.
and some don't. I like it because you can select in orthographic views, which is super handy, but not everybody does. So it's just it's a preference thing.
It's also pretty good for making sure you don't have, because you know when you extrude, sometimes you'll double extrude.
Oh yeah, no, that's the most important reason. And when we get into troubleshooting bad geometry, that's when I show it.
That's what I learned. That move the camera.
You need to use a combination of the Option key and either right, left, or center mouse. Okay.
Oh, but I mean like the.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
All right. And, okay. And what I would recommend very highly for you is you need to take some notes in class. Okay?
Yeah, because I tried to take notes, but guys,
it's okay.
taking notes,
That's okay.
I lose something.
But the videos are recorded, so you can see them again. But where you're going to have trouble is if you're not writing stuff down, you're going to have a really hard time accessing that. You know what I mean? Like when we were talking about the beginning of class, if I say, okay, it's time to do an activity, and you have no idea how to do it, then you know that it's not sinking in for you just yet, the way you're doing it, right? So take notes, definitely. If you need me to say something again, I have no problem with that. If you need me to say it another way, I can also do that. You know what I mean? If it doesn't make sense the way I'm describing it, I'm totally fine with that. But you're gonna continue to struggle if you keep doing what you're doing. Does that make sense? Okay.
Part here, you said that about connecting the.
We're not connecting anything. We're just moving components around. So go to your orthographic view. Yep. Select that. Now zoom, make that window bigger by hitting spacebar. Okay. Now zoom in on this one. There you go. Now right mouse button over the geometry and choose vertex. Got to be over the geometry. Get it right over one of the lines. Right on the line. Yep. Any line. Now choose vertex. Now it's blue, so you can choose a vertex and then move it using the move tool. Click it, left mouse button. No, left. There you go. And then switch to your move tool and move it. Do you see? Okay. Note taking is going to be important. You can see how quickly the information piles up, right? That's why you got to write it down. That will help you out tremendously. How you guys doing? Good, good. How are these guys doing back here, Brian?
Doesn't have anything.
I would download the activity file folder again because it probably got corrupted. Did you download it wirelessly? Okay, because the problem is just like a phone call being dropped while you're in the middle of a phone call, digital interruption, files can become corrupted when you download them wirelessly. It can be missing data, and that can cause the file to not work properly. So whenever I can, I do a hardline download. You know, I take an Ethernet cable, plug it right into my router, get it like that. Way less likely to be a corruption issue. But you probably have to download the file again, or at least that one. Does that make sense? But if you experience that through the other ones, probably what the issue is. Does that make sense? Just the sheer odds with all these people that yours is the one that's empty. Yeah, something happened during the download. So, yep, no worries. You just download it again. It's not so bad. Yeah.
I'm about to ask a little question.
You can always ask questions.
Yes, I was a little bit confused. So with this activity that we did and the asset that we modeled, do we turn it all as a weekly assignment?
Yep. The weekly assignment, which we haven't talked about yet, is when you're building objects. And you do that all week long, and then on Monday night at midnight, you got to turn it in.
Are we going to learn texturing?
We won't be able to do texturing in here, but we're going to do UV mapping, which is the first step before texturing. I wish we could do texturing. I don't have enough time.
So
ones down here, the red ones,
Mm-hmm.
there's 2 layers of dust move. Do you want us to move just the first one and not the
The
second?
edge flow should match. So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
it gets trickier once they have depth, right? It's always more complicated, but it's important to understand how it works. All right. How's everybody doing? Good with this?
What's the shortcut for the vertex?
There are no shortcuts. Right mouse button. All right. Yeah, here we go. All right, hopefully you guys had some success with this activity. Like I said, this is the first big test of setting the project to make sure that everything opens as it should. This is your first test of, okay, I explained to you how to do something, and now it's, it's a little bit more complicated, and remembering all the steps. So if you feel like you struggled a little bit with this, again, you got to take a long look at how am I approaching the learning of this material. I am taking notes, but maybe I'm typing them. Well, maybe you might want to try writing them down. I've got to be perfectly honest with you in terms of note taking. Handwriting your notes is much more effective in terms of retention than typing, because when you're typing, you're more thinking of the spelling of things and not really the concept, versus handwriting. There's actually a kinesthetic element to that, where you're literally ingraining it into your memory through writing it by adding a physical component to it. And what's amazing about it is you might not ever even look at your notes, but you remember it better because you wrote it down. Much like the idea, if you write the same word 10 times, you probably will spell it right next time you have to spell it. Same thing holds true with this stuff. We are going to cover a mountain of information every day. You won't remember it all. It's not possible. There's too much. Does that make sense? And that's why your notebook is your most powerful tool. Well, second, your brain is number 1, but your notebook is number 2. So again, give yourself the best opportunity to be successful at this stuff. And like I said, these exercises are for you guys to do. These activities, you can work on them in lab when you're in lab. You can go to an open help lab in the Google Hangout and work on it in there. You have many, many opportunities to practice. And what you are going to have to do with this is practice. That's the good news. For those of you who thought your ability to use Maya was somehow connected to your midichlorian count, not at all. In terms of your effectiveness at Maya, this is just like hitting a baseball, playing a guitar, learning to surf, learning to sing, studying your lines in a play. Anything you've ever had to learn to do, and you do it with any amount of ability, you achieve that through practice. This is no different. It's not going to magically work for you like it works for me. Quick hands up. How many of you have been working with Maya for more than 15 years? Okay. Enough said. Point being, if I have used this application for this long, is it going to look fluid and easy when I do it? Is it going to be easy when you do it the first time you touch it? No. Probably not. But that's the whole point. Don't be misled by how easy it looks when I do it. It's going to be harder for you. You can do this. You will achieve this level easily. It just takes time. Easily. Trust me. If I can do it, anybody can. But the point is, it's going to take a lot of hard work. And to be honest with you, I came from a traditional art background. I draw, I sculpt, I paint. I loved all that stuff. They put a computer in my hands, and I was like, somebody shoot me. Because I was like, no, if this is the future of art, I don't want to be in art anymore. But what happened was I realized that this is what I wanted to do, and I wanted to do this more than anything. So I decided that I'm going to have to make some sacrifices. My friends are out having fun. I was with Maya. I had to make that call. This meant enough to me that those other things were not as big a deal. So I made this my priority, and I learned it. And it was funny because at the beginning, I was terrible, absolutely awful. My classmates made fun of me. They said the best job I could ever have would be somebody who test drives new versions of Maya, because I could blow up Maya in ways that no one had ever seen before. And so that was the joke. My traditional art was pretty good. My digital art was pretty pathetic. But what happened was my classmates would ask me, because they saw my my concept art, and they'd be like, wow, your classic work is good. Could you give me some design ideas? So I would give them design ideas, and they would help me with my digital end of things. And soon, the digital started to catch up with the traditional skills, and then they hated me because I could make great art both digitally and analog. So I became, you know, the villain at that point. But the way it works is, if you practice this, you will get good. I guarantee it. Anybody can do this. Not everybody has the willpower and the drive to do it the way it's going to need to be done to be successful. Does that make sense? So here's where we separate who really wants to do this and who doesn't. And it's all about your devotion to this material. Maya is your new significant other. So get ready. If you want to get good at this, you guys are going to be intimate. But seriously, it's going to take hard work. You're going to spend a lot of time with this application, but the end result is you can do this if you do it. Again, I just want to let you know, anybody can do this. Not everybody is willing to give what it takes. That's the difference. All right. Excuse me. So in terms of modeling, I know you guys are frustrated because you're like, okay, I want to build stuff already. I hate vertices. Yeah, I get that. I want to build stuff too. That is definitely the way more fun part of it. But guess what you use to build with? Vertices. That's right. So whether you love them or you hate them, they're your buddies now. So in terms of building stuff, the first stage is the block out or primitive build. And this is where we start to sort of recognize the shape and the form of the object, terms you should be familiar with at this point, as we build. And what we're doing is we're creating some simple primitives, and we're bringing them together to make a more complex shape. Just like the idea that when I'm drawing something, I'll have some very simple shapes, and I bring them together, and then ultimately it creates something more complex. So just like illustration, modeling is the same concept. With just a few forms and shapes, we can bring these things together and make something a lot more complicated. Right? Wine bottle. So in terms of the blockout, what we're going to be doing is opening a file, and there's going to be an image playing in the background, a picture to be our guide like we did today, except it's going to be an object. In this instance, it's a peppermill. And what we're going to be doing is we're just trying to use the tools in the toolbox, and we're trying to use the simple polygon geometry to create shape and form. And the way we're going to do that is, again, if you take a look here, you can see this is a cylinder. I just squashed it down. This is another cylinder. That's another cylinder that I squashed down. This is a cylinder. This is a sphere that I squashed a little bit with my scale tool. More cylinders, more spheres squashed. There's a sphere that I had to stretch out. Does that make sense? I'm just trying to create shape and form out of my polygon primitives that matches the image behind, almost like I'm trying to cover it. Does that make sense? I want to fill in all of that information with the polygons. So, do we have an activity for this? Absolutely, of course. So let's make sure we set our project, and we'll do a simple block out so you can see how that works. Yes. You did it already? Oh, good for you. All right. So here's this. Oh, you guys all did this one? Just you? All right. Well, good for you. Then you can walk around and help me and Brian. All right. So we're working on a activity file. So of course I want to set my project. Luckily, I've already set my project to my activity file folder. So Maya thinks I'm still working on that, which is true. So I can just go to File, Open Scene. And this time I'm going to go to my blockout activity. They're alphabetical, so you can look for them alphabetically. And open it. If you want to save this file, you can. If you want to work on it later or whatever, that's fine. If you don't want to save it, great. You can work on it again, get better, practice in lab. It takes 10,000 hours to master anything, so start working. Now, if you look here, what you'll see is, and not everybody, their depth camera might not show up, but what you're going to see in the depth camera is the fact that these four objects are sort of staggered in terms of their depth, and it kind of helps you see, oh yeah, these are cylinders in terms of the shapes going on in here. Now, again, just like before, we want to use our orthographic views to help us with the shape change. So I'm going to concentrate on the front and the side to give me the information I need to block out. So I'm going to start with the pencil, and you'll have to take my word for it, that's a pencil. And I'm going to do this first one, and you guys can watch me closely, and then you guys can do the other three, and they are increasing in complexity as we go left to right. So this is a pencil. If I was going to draw a pencil, what simple shape would I create first? Cylinder, right? If I'm going to draw a pencil, it's a cylinder. Well, guess what? If I'm going to block out a pencil, it's a cylinder also. So I create a cylinder by clicking on that button, and it creates a cylinder for me. Using my move tool, I bring it into position. Now, in terms of lining this thing up and making sure it matches, some people like to model in wireframe mode. Who remembers what key I pressed for wireframe? 4, absolutely. Good job. 4 brings me right into wireframe mode. Go back with 5. I don't like working in wireframe mode because I'm an extremely visual guy. I really need to see what I'm working with. So what I will do instead of wireframe mode is I will leave my geometry shaded, and in my panel menu, under shading, I choose X-ray. X-ray is a way of being able to see the geometry as well as the image plane behind it. So it makes it somewhat transparent. So now I can see much better in terms of this piece of geometry and the picture I'm trying to match. Now, this thing is definitely not the right size and shape, so I'm going to use my scale tool to change it. Now, something I want to show you is if I scale on the x-axis, now my pencil looks like it's the right thickness, right? But let's look at perspective and see what happened there. Is that the shape of a pencil I'm looking? So what happened is I scaled only in X, right? So it only got thinner in X. You guys see what was happening there? So that's not going to help me. What I want to do is scale from the middle, because that will maintain the proportion of my cylinder. So if I scale from the middle, looks like it fits. If I look at my perspective view, that still looks like it could be a pencil. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, of the utmost importance when you are trying to match your reference or your image planes, you want to make sure it matches in more than one orthographic view. So it matches here, but when I go to my other orthographic view, my geometry is way over here. That's what I'm trying to match. So I'm going to have to move this over there. So I'm going to use my move tool. Move it over there. So now, once I line this up, if it looks good in this view, and it looks good in this view, I know I'm going the right direction. Does that make sense? They cross-reference each other, literally. All right? Now, it's not long enough, so I'm going to use my scale tool to elongate it. No, it is now. So I elongate it, right? Looks good here. Go to this view. Looks good here. I know I'm good to go. Make sense? Okay. Now, come back over here. The next big shape I have to make is this metal collar. If you've ever looked at a pencil, you know that this metal collar basically crimps the eraser to the wood of the pencil. So I need this. What shape is that, do you think? Probably a cylinder. Now, it's true, I could just make another one. These things are, there's no charge. You can make a million, right? But I've already got a cylinder in my scene, and it's pretty close to the shape I want already. So instead of making another one, I'm going to go to Edit and choose Duplicate. Edit, Duplicate. And that'll give me another cylinder. The tricky thing about duplication is you would never know that there's a duplicate here, because when you duplicate something, it literally puts the duplicate right on top of the original. So you won't see it. It's there, you just can't see it until you move it, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this. I need to squash in this one. And I'm going to move it into place. Right? Looks like it's a little short there. So I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And make it a little bit wider. All right? Looks good here. Come over here. Looks good here, so I know it's lining up out here because it's matching in both of my orthographics. So now I come to this one, and again, I need to make another cylinder for the eraser. I've already got one there, so edit, duplicate. And incidentally, in terms of the duplication, you see I'm in object mode. That is definitely important. Edit, duplicate. It makes another cylinder. I move it into place. I'm going to scale it down to make it a little bit smaller. All right, and I'm only blocking out at this stage, so it's okay if the geometry is all sticking into each other and what have you. I'm just blocking things out. All right, so it's looking good there. Image planes don't line up perfectly, but I'm going to hedge the difference between the two so that it looks decent. And again, things are starting to line up and come together as they should in my perspective view. The last little bit of detail I've got to hit on this pencil is the tip. Of my polygon primitives, which one most closely matches that, you think? The cone, right? Yeah, this one's a cone. So I create a cone, right? 2 issues with my cone. What's wrong with it? It's upside down and it's too big. So first I'm going to flip it over, and it's going to be 180 degrees of rotation to flip it completely over. And then I'm going to move it into place, and then I got to start scaling it. And then moving it to try to make it match. All right, looks good here. Let me check my other view. Oh, not even close. It's way the heck over here. So I got to drag it over, get it lined up. All right. And if it looks good on this view, and it looks good on this view, then I know I'm good to go out here. Does that make sense? They cross-reference each other. So this is a pencil blocked out, or primitive build, right? Now there's a couple more objects in here. We've got a chair, a mailbox, and a lamp. Okay, these are harder, obviously, but things to think about. The chair is made of 4 legs, right? So I can make one and duplicate that one to bring it over to the other side. Once I've got 2, I can duplicate both of those and make the legs in the back. Does that make sense? Smart building. There's the seat, there's the support in the back, and there's the part where your back lays against that seat. And you can start to see what shapes you would need to build it. And just as a little hint, this lamp is composed of cylinders primarily. So you want rounded things. All right. So again, Brian and I are going to walk around and see how you guys are doing. Hopefully you will have some success with blocking out, because that's going to be your first assignment. Yes. Yep. 1 second. Good, good. All right. So we're doing pretty good. Let's see. Yeah, you're getting there. Yep. We're on a different exercise, but I'm glad you're doing well at that one. Like I said, the lab is an excellent environment to repeat these activities if you need to, because it gives you more practice time and more instructors to help you.
Me? I'm good.
Yeah, no, I know you're fine.
I was just working on it earlier. I figured it out.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. It looks easy, and then you try to build it. I'll take a look at it. Good, good. Oh, look at you moving components. Yes.
Okay. How do we use extrude?
We're going to get to that. We didn't get to that yet. Yeah, we're just blocking stuff out right now.
You don't want to use extrude yet?
Mm-mm, not yet. Not yet. Good, good. Good. Oh, you got it there? Cool. Very nice. Good. Awesome. Good job.
How do I make this thicker though? That's the question. I forgot. Like the guy told me, but I completely it doesn't dawn on me.
Well, there are many ways you could, but probably the easiest, based on what you've got right there, would be grab all of the edges and do an extrusion and pull it inward, and then do another extrusion and give it just a little bit of a thickness to the inside. So grab all of the interior edges for each of those openings.
All these openings?
Yeah, all the openings at one time, but just the openings. And then do an extrusion and pull it inward. Good, good, good.
I'll just say wooden upright.
Very nice.
How do you get that view? Because I'm not.
Spacebar will take you out to 4 view.
I mean, with the wireframe.
5 is shaded, 4 is wireframe. You just got to decide which one you want. Yeah, press 5. There it is.
Yeah, it turns on interactive create.
Yes, that's frustrating. At least for me. Not my thing. I prefer the other way.
Yeah.
It's funny, I had somebody tell me, no, I love interactive creation, and I can make the shape I want exactly. I go, okay, make that. They couldn't do it. Like, so what good is it again? Yes.
Scaling, when you grab the handle, it scales the object relative to the center.
That's correct.
Is there a way to like scale it relative to like one edge so like the bottom would stay in place, but it would just like?
There is, but there's actually a better way to do it than the way you're thinking. Okay. But for right now, just play with it like that. But I promise you, I will show you a much easier way. Because I know it's weird when it scales in both positive and negative at the same time. Yes. Yeah.
Actually, it's kind of interesting. This one was actually the cylinder. I just cut it in half.
Yeah, that's all you need, and that'll give you the shape you need. No, you're doing great. Keep it up.
Yeah, you know, I'm getting
It's amazing how quickly you can come along. You know what I mean? It's all about the focus. How they doing back there, Brian?
One guy almost stumped me. Like, he had that fourth is up, right?
Right.
And he just had the cylinder.
Mm-hmm.
And in one view, it matched the reference.
Mm-hmm.
The other view, it was about half the size. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, you're just not in close enough. I think I got in close enough. Like, he had accidentally scaled the image plane up.
Oh,
and I'm like,
yeah, that happened. Yep. And important lessons.
yeah, right.
Yep, exactly. Well, and that's why I have them doing stuff, because you learn so much by the mistakes you make. Then you can go forward. Yes, yes. Well, we've talked about this. I think human beings as a species, whatever we get right, we take for granted.
Yeah.
The mistakes we make, we punish ourselves for. So we will learn it when we screw it up. I don't know why we have to do that to learn, but we have to make the mistake first. Yeah.
I'm trying to. I put a cylinder to make the pencil.
Yeah. What's the matter? Oh, no, you have the image plane selected. Don't move the picture around. You want to move the cylinder.
I know. I tried. Then it just keeps moving.
No, you can do it.
Oh.
See? Just make sure you don't have the picture.
I moved.
Yes, I think you're zooming. I think it thinks you're moving the camera. Yeah, it's not easy, but that's why we practice. You got to get used to it. It's very similar to when you first learn how to drive stick. Did you learn how to drive standard transmission? Okay, because it's tricky. It's awkward, you know what I mean? That whole exchange of gas and clutch and knowing when and how to shift, and every car is different. When you first learn, it's really ugly. A lot of grinding of gears. I wouldn't recommend it in the lecture because we change things quite a bit. When you get to the lab, that's totally fine. But I would be worried you would miss something. Good question, though. Thank you for asking. All righty, guys. It looks like we're doing pretty well with this. I'm excited to see that. And like I said, practice makes perfect, and thank goodness that that's all it takes. There's no magic. You don't have to be special born, nothing like that. You got to want this. You get practice, you want it, you get it. That simple. All right, so this is a simple block out. Again, in terms of these activities, you can do them in lab. You can come to the Google Hangout and work on them. Any opportunity you can to actually practice with the machine. And there's no shortcuts. You have to do the work. You know, if there was like a pill I could give you and you would just bypass this whole rough, awkward learning stage, I would give it to you. But the reality is you got to put in the time. There's not a faster, easier way to do this. This is an extremely complicated application. It is not easy to learn, and it is not easy to use. And thank goodness for that, because if it was a super easy application to learn and a super easy application to use, then everybody would use it, and we would get paid dirt. Does that make sense? So thank goodness it's complicated. You should fear simplicity because that means people are going to get fired. All right. So block out was a success. So let's talk about your skill check for Lecture 2. Your skill check for Lecture 1 with Captain Idaho. The Build Me assignment. Hopefully you guys had some fun with that. That's a great one for getting used to the interface and moving around and moving pieces. So if you feel like, you know what, that was okay, but it was really rough, I felt like I struggled a lot, do that one again. It's just your time. That's the only investment. So please use these things I give you because they don't mean anything to you. So they're great to practice on. All right, so let's take a look at your skill check for Lecture 2. As I promised, it's going to be a culmination of everything we've learned today. So we're going to be blocking out an asset. So we're going to be blocking out the jar asset start file. And this will be your first opportunity to block out an asset that we will be building later on. So since this is a skill check, the first thing I need to do is what? Set my project to the skill check folder. Totally different folder, right? So I got mine, I go to File, I go to Set Project, and at this time, again, I'm going to go to my Documents folder, I go to my Special 3DF folder, and I choose my skill check files and set my project to that. And now I'm going to open my scene, and I'm going to open the jar asset start file. All right, so I open that bad boy. And you will see, oh, look at that. Image planes, look, with grid lines to help me with scale. So here I've got this jar, right? You can see it in my front and side views. I don't see it here because it's actually hidden. If I wanted to have it seen, I could have it there, but it's unchecked in terms of image planes. So I don't see it there because we don't really model a lot in our perspective view. When we are modeling, primarily we are in our orthographics. So if I'm going to be blocking out this jar, just like drawing it, right? Very similar to what we just did. So what shape primarily makes up the shape and form of this jar? Cylinder, definitely, right? So I come over here, click on cylinder and make a new one. Incidentally, if I open this scene file and I see a big pink box with a big pink X in it, what's the problem? Didn't set the project right. So make sure the image planes populate. So I get my cylinder in there. It looks good. I need to make it bigger, so I'm going to scale it and make sure it fits. Right? Move that into place. All right. I need to make it a little bit taller so it fits in there. I'm starting to lose my image plane. What do I like to do to see the picture behind? X-ray and go to wireframe, or I can go to X-ray. I like X-ray a little bit better. What's that under? Do you remember? Shading, very close. Shading, X-ray, so now I can see the geometry as well as the picture behind. I tuck that in there. I go over to this view. It's off a little bit, so I want to make sure I line it up there as well. And I'm going to set it for X-ray over here also. So it looks good here, looks good there. Time to proceed. Next biggest shape is this big lip across the top. What do you think would be the best way to try to accomplish that? What do you guys think? Well, I could scale it if I wanted to, right? But that's going to make the whole object bigger. If I'm doing a block out, I'm just using simple primitives. So which simple primitive do you think? The cone, right? So I'm going to go grab the cone, make one of those guys, move it into place. It's facing the wrong way, so I'm going to flip it over. Again, 180 degrees. We'll turn it completely upside down. Scale it. And I want to make sure it fits. All right, looking pretty good there. Let me go to this view. Make sure it's looking good there. If it looks good here and it looks good here, I know things are lining up out here. All right. Now, I've got this like lip here in the jar. How am I going to do that? I could do that with a sphere if I wanted to. Create a sphere, pull it into place. I could make it much bigger and then squash it down. And that would give me that piece. But also use the torus, right? The donut polygon. So I can grab that donut polygon, make it bigger so that it fits over the geometry, and then I'm going to need to squash it down because it's a little bit too tall. All right, looks good here. Let me make sure it looks good over here. Nope, need to scoot it over some on this axis, and I need to bring it up some. There we go. Looks good here, looks good there. So I know it's looking pretty good out here. Now, it's true, this is a jar, so it should be open on the top, but I haven't shown you guys how to do that yet. So we don't have to do that for the block out. When we get into modeling, then we'll be putting that opening in there. But for right now, this would suffice for the skill check of blocking out the jar. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, that's all I'm going to be requiring you to do for that skill check. And then, of course, you want to make sure you save the file because you're going to be submitting it. When are skill checks due? Saturday. Skill checks, Saturday. Make sense? Put those two together. Skill checks are due on Saturday. I would do them well before Saturday if I were you, if at all possible, but Saturday is ultimately when you've got to turn it in. And the reason it's better for you to start working on these sooner is because the weekly assignment is due when? Monday, right? And the weekly assignment is basically a culmination of all your skill checks. So if you wait till Saturday at midnight to do your skill checks, you just limited yourself to 2 whole days only to be able to work on your assets that are due on Monday. Does that make sense? You got all of Saturday and all of Monday, and that's it. That's really not enough time. You're going to need more time than that. Yeah. The activities that we do in class together are never turned in. Those are the ones that we do so that I know and you understand what we're doing. Does that make sense? The skill checks you do submit, those are due on Saturdays, and that's basically everything we talked about that day. So it would be sort of redundant for you to turn in the activities as well as the skill check because the activities add up to the skill check, and the skill checks add up to the weekly turn-in. Does that make sense? So we just want to make sure you guys know what you're doing and you can proceed forward because these things are, again, as I said, steps on a ladder, and each one of them will take you to the height you hope to achieve. So you need them all. All right? And remember, when it comes to saving, take a look at the original file and see what type of file it is, because you're going to have to save it as the same variety file. So because this particular file started life as an MA, when I go to save it, you go to File, Save Scene As, and make sure you switch it to an MA or Maya ASCII file. And then, of course, you're going to name it properly. You're going to call it your last name and your first name, and skill check 2 _ 3DF _ 1710 if you are in the October month. And then now it'll save. Because otherwise, if you try to save it as the wrong variety file, Maya will say, oh, no, I can't do it. Error, clashing nodes. It'll freak out. It won't be able to do it. So you want to make sure that you save it as the right file type so that Maya will actually save it for you. All righty? Any questions about what we talked about today? No? Okay. Now, again, this is what the classes are going to be like. It's not like it's going to suddenly slow down. It's going to be like this every day, full steam ahead. So make sure you get enough rest at night, the most possible. Eat and drink well whenever you can, because your body needs the energy to function properly. There's diminishing returns on eating poorly and not sleeping enough, so do your best. Bring your A game every day, because the stuff I tell you about is the stuff you have to be able to do to be successful. If you're missing any information or any skills, it will show up in your grades almost immediately. Does that make sense? So do your best to be prepared coming in here and fired up coming out. All right. So in terms of, let's take a look at, in terms of your weekly turn-in, something I wanted to put out there for you guys. You'll notice for each weekly turn-in, there is a turn-in procedure video. I cannot put enough the word please at the front of. Please, 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 please watch the turn-in procedure video. Because literally, step by step, I tell you exactly what you have to do to turn in your work. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. You do not want to miss that video. That one's critical. So, because I don't actually, in the lecture, I don't go over the turn-in process. I could make a video of that. Why use up our valuable time? Because it's very limited as it is. So in terms of the time together, I want to make sure that that's on a video. You can watch it as many times as you want. Stop, rewind, play as many times as you need. So we don't talk about that in class at all. You've got to see that in the video. Make sense? Hell yeah? Great. All right, so I'm going to take a quick look at what your week 1 turn-in is going to look like, just so that you can see it. And then, because I think it's important to see where you're headed, because it makes it easier to get there when you know where you're going. Let's take a look at the week 1 objective. Okay, it's in lecture 1. All right. So I'm going to go to File, Open Scene, Documents, New Lecture, Lecture 1. All right, so here's an example of your week 1 turn-in. What's going to happen is we've got a scene file that's got a whole bunch of pillars in it. Those have been built for you. It's an empty file. You are going to have to build objects in individual files and then bring them into this file. Okay? Now, you are going to block out several objects, and I color-coded them just so that you can see that they're made of many pieces and representative of a block out, which is very much like I just demonstrated for you with the jar, just with other objects. You know, the bottle stopper, the spark plug. These are all things that you are going to build by blocking them out, and you don't have to color the geometry. Again, I just did that to help show that these are all different pieces squished together. All right, so you're going to block out 3 objects, and you're actually going to model 2 of them. So by Monday, you guys will be modeling, because your Monday night turn-in is going to include 2 models. So obviously, we're in blocking out right now. Good idea to try to start working on that assignment now. Does that make sense? Because when we get to modeling, that is going to be more complicated, I promise you. So the good news is In terms of this turn-in, as with a couple of our turn-ins, you're being graded on the blockouts. The modeled assets, we're just letting you have a free run at it, practice, because the week after that, then it's for real. We're grading your models. Does that make sense? So this is your opportunity to do the work that's going to be on week 2's turn-in, get some feedback on it before it really hurts your grade. Does that make sense? So it's a great practice run. So do it in earnest, and you will reap the rewards of having done so. Yes, go ahead. Okay, and that's an excellent question because I get that one a lot. Can I just model if I know how to model a little bit, or did I? Absolutely not. The goal of the assignment is blocking out. Does that make sense? This falls under the parameters of you have to do what your employer asks you to do. Right now, you work for me. So when I say it's got to be a blockout, it's got to be a blockout. Does that make sense? There's no interpretation. So if you blocked it out, what I would recommend, or if you modeled it, I would recommend go back and block it out. Does that make sense? Because one of the things that we grade on is, was the object built with the correct number of parts? If you take a look at the self-grade document, that's one of the parameters. So if you didn't block it out, it's going to be made of fewer parts, therefore not the correct number. Does that make sense? There's an important distinction that I'm hoping you guys will learn between a blockout or primitive build and a modeled asset. Does that make sense? Two totally different things. Because a lot of times what I'll get, not a lot of times, in some instances, I will get models for a blockout turn-in. Nope, those are not blockouts, those are models. In some instances, I will get blockouts instead of models. Those are not models, those are blockouts. Does that make sense? You got to be aware, what am I turning in? Specifically, what's being asked of me, because that's what we always want to do, exactly what we were asked of. And if you're not sure, always ask. Always, always, always. And that's why we have the lab for you guys to say, hey, Marcus and Sarah, I'm thinking of turning this in. What do you think? I mean, honestly, have you ever been to a class where they will look at your work in advance and tell you whether or not that's a good idea to turn that in? And that just doesn't happen. But if you guys get work done, you can show it to us in the lab or in the Google Hangout and say, hey, I'm going to turn this in on Monday. Am I going the right way with this? Yes, you are. Or no, you need to fix this, or don't forget to do that. But if you wait till Monday night to work on this stuff, your window of feedback is almost none. Does that make sense? So always a good idea to start as soon as you can on things, get feedback as soon as you can on things, and then you know you're doing the right thing. And then you don't have these stressed turn-ins where you're turning in at 11:59 and in total panic and it won't upload. Oh, I hope it's okay. You know, and then until it gets graded, you don't know how well you did. If you've got feedback already, you know what you have to do and you know you're going to be all right. Right? Way easier way to go with it. Does that make sense? That's a terrific question. Thank you so much for asking that one. Yes, go ahead. That's another terrific question. I have a document that actually lists all of the objects I asked you guys to build, and it tells you how many pieces ballpark it should be. So if you take a look at that parts guide, it is part of the download, I believe, for the asset file folder. There's a list of every object I asked you to build and how many pieces it should be made of in the blockout and how many pieces it should be made of when you model it, because those are two different numbers. Blockout numbers will be higher. No, not at all. That's another great question. Those numbers are ballpark to help us give you a guide so you know if you're in the area. One piece either way, not going to be a big difference. Does that make sense? That's another great question. Yes? Yes. Yeah, well, there's different views. Again, you just hit spacebar to go to the different views you want. But you could also, if you wanted to, go to, let's see, where's the different layouts? I got to see where they move that to, because you can literally tell it which windows you want there. Brian, do you know where saved layouts went? I'll have to look that one up. But somewhere around here, they basically say, well, what layout do you want? And you can say just front and side if that's what you want. But the overwhelming majority of the time, you're going to have one of your orthographics up at a time because you want that to be nice and big so you can see what you're working on. So typically, you don't work with both views open at the same time, just those two, but you could. But typically, you don't. But that is an option, and once I figure out where they've hidden it, because they always change the interface, which makes my job awesome. So I just got to figure out where they put it. But that is a thing. All righty. Any other questions? No? All right, awesome. That's all we needed to talk about today. So I'm going to wrap this up. And for those of you guys who are in my local class, you are already in your lab, which is awesome. What I would recommend doing is just take a little break, walk outside, get some fresh air, drink of water, whatever it is you got to do, have some donuts or bread or whatever at the end of class, and then come back in here and be ready to work, because once the lab starts rolling, I'm sure you will have a lot of questions then. And then at that point, Marcus and Sarah will be here too, and we will help you find your way through this. All righty, so thank you very much, guys. Good lecture today. I will see you again on Friday. And we'll talk about some more stuff, and big hint, it's going to be modeling, because that's what's due on Monday. Yeah.